I woke up in the hospital after my accident and heard my children whisper about selling everything once I signed. I pretended to sleep. When the nurse brought the pen, I signed something else entirely. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. My name is Hilda, and at 68 years old, I thought I knew my children better than I knew myself. I was wrong. But let me tell you who I was before that hospital bed became my battlefield, before those whispers shattered 40 years of motherhood into pieces so small, I'm still finding them in the corners of my heart. I raised 3 children in a 2-bedroom house in Cedar Falls, Iowa, after my husband Frank died in a construction accident, when Tommy, my youngest, was only 3. Michael was 12 then, old enough to understand but young enough to need his father desperately. Jennifer was 9, and she cried for 6 months straight, only stopping when I held her and sang the lullabies Frank used to sing. I took 2 jobs at local diners, my feet swelling in cheap shoes as I carried plates for 12 hours, then came home to bake pies I'd sell to neighbors and the church. Every blister on my hands was worth it when Michael graduated law school, when Jennifer got her real estate license, when Tommy took over Frank's hardware store that I'd somehow managed to keep running all those years. I remember the day Michael got accepted to law school. I had saved for 8 years, putting coins in a jar hidden behind the flour in the pantry. When the acceptance letter came, I handed him that jar, heavy with possibility, and watched his eyes fill with tears. "Mom, how?" he asked. I just smiled and said what I always said. Family finds a way. Jennifer's wedding dress came from my own mother's silk curtains, which I spent 3 months hand sewing into something beautiful. She never knew. She walked down that aisle believing she wore a designer gown, and I let her believe it because her happiness was worth more than my pride. Tommy was different. Born with a learning disability the doctors couldn't quite name, he struggled in school while his siblings soared. But that boy had Frank's hands, could fix anything mechanical by the time he was 10. When the hardware store almost went under during the recession, Tommy and I worked 18-hour days together, reorganizing inventory, negotiating with suppliers, painting the walls ourselves to save money. We saved that store with our bare hands and determination that ran in our blood like iron. The town knew me as the woman who never turned anyone away. When the Martinez family's house burned down, they lived in my basement for 3 months. When old Mr. Chen needed dialysis rides 3 times a week, I rearranged my entire schedule. My door was always open, my coffee was always hot, and my kitchen table had heard more problems than a confession booth. I wasn't a saint. I was just a woman who understood that we're all walking each other home, one kindness at a time. 3 months ago, I had signed papers making my children equal partners in the hardware store. The business had exploded in value thanks to a new development project downtown. My little sacrifice, Frank's legacy, was suddenly worth nearly $3 million. I signed those papers with such joy, imagining my grandchildren's college funds, imagining security for generations. Michael had drawn up the documents himself, his law degree finally serving his family. Jennifer had found us the perfect financial advisor. Tommy promised to honor his father's memory in every business decision. That's who I was. Hilda Margaret Thompson, mother of 3, widow of Frank, keeper of secrets, baker of pies, and believer in the fundamental goodness of the children I'd raised. That was before the accident, before the whispers, before I discovered that sometimes the people you die for are the very ones holding the knife. My days had a rhythm as comforting as a heartbeat. Every morning at 5, I'd wake without an alarm clock, my body trained by decades of early shifts. The coffee maker would gurgle to life, filling my kitchen with the rich aroma of Colombian beans, the good stuff I finally allowed myself to buy after years of drinking the cheap brand. I'd sit at my kitchen table, the one Frank built with his own hands 35 years ago, running my fingers over the scratches and dents that told our family's story. There was the gouge from when Michael tried to carve his initials at age 7, The burn mark from Jennifer's science project gone wrong. The perfectly round indentation from Tommy's toy hammer when he was helping Daddy fix things. Outside my window, Frank's rose garden bloomed in organized chaos. I'd maintained it exactly as he left it: red roses for love, white for new beginnings, and yellow for friendship. Every morning, I'd take my coffee out to the small bench he'd placed between the rose bushes and talk to him. "The kids are doing well, Frank," I'd say. "You'd be so proud." The neighbors probably thought I was crazy, this old woman talking to flowers, but those moments kept me grounded, reminded me that love doesn't die just because a person does. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I volunteered at the elementary school, reading to the kindergartners who'd climb into my lap like I was their own grandmother. Wednesdays were for grocery shopping, where I'd buy the ingredients for Sunday dinner plus extra for the Hendersons next door, who were struggling since Mr. Henderson's stroke. I'd leave the groceries on their porch with a note saying, "Someone's thinking of you," never signing my name. Fridays meant visiting Frank's grave with fresh roses and updates about the grandchildren's soccer games and school plays. But Sundays were sacred. By 2 in the afternoon, my house would fill with the aroma of pot roast and fresh bread. Michael would arrive first, always punctual, his silver BMW pristine in my gravel driveway. He'd kiss my cheek, smelling of expensive cologne, and ask about my week while his wife Sandra supervised their twins in the backyard. Jennifer would burst through the door next, talking rapidly about her latest house sale, her energy filling every corner. Her husband David would quietly help set the table, one of those gentle souls who balanced Jennifer's hurricane personality perfectly. Tommy always came last, usually with grease under his fingernails from working on someone's car even though it was his day off. His girlfriend Maria, carrying a dessert she'd attempted to make from scratch. The dining room would explode with conversation. Michael's boys would show me their karate moves while Jennifer's daughter practiced her violin in the living room. Tommy would fix whatever was broken that week, the leaky faucet or squeaky door, while Maria helped me in the kitchen, eager to learn my recipes. We'd gather around that scratch table, heads bowed as I said grace, thanking God for the blessing of family. These moments were my wealth, worth more than any bank account. After dinner, we'd move to the living room where photo albums would come out, and I'd tell the same stories they'd heard 100 times. How their father proposed at the county fair, how Michael was born during a blizzard, how Jennifer once tried to sell her brother to the neighbors for $5, how Tommy's first word was hammer. They'd laugh and groan, "Mom, we know this story," but their eyes would be soft with affection. As they'd leave, each would hug me tight. Michael would slip money into my purse despite my protests. Jennifer would promise to stop by during the week. Tommy would check my car's oil and tire pressure. I'd stand on my porch, watching their taillights disappear into the darkness, my heart so full it could burst. This was my normal, my beautiful, ordinary life. A life built on love, sacrifice, and the absolute certainty that my children were my greatest accomplishment. How could I have known that while I was counting my blessings, they were counting my assets? The first crack in my perfect world appeared 3 weeks before the accident, hairline thin and easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. It was a Tuesday afternoon, unseasonably warm for October, and I'd decided to surprise Jennifer at her office with lunch. Her favorite sandwich from Murphy's Deli, turkey club with extra avocado, wrapped in white paper and still warm. I had my key to her office, the one she'd given me for emergencies, and I let myself in quietly, not wanting to interrupt if she was with a client. The sound of her fingers flying across the keyboard filled the empty reception area. Through the glass door, I could see her hunched over her laptop, completely absorbed. I pushed the door open with my hip, holding up the sandwich bag like a peace offering, and said, "Surprise, sweetheart, I brought lunch." The transformation on her face was something I'll never forget. Pure panic flashed across her features before she slammed the laptop shut so hard the desk shook. Papers scattered, her coffee mug tipped, sending brown liquid spreading across her desk calendar. "Mom," she practically shrieked, You scared me to death. Why didn't you call? I wanted to surprise you, I said, setting down the sandwich to help clean the spilled coffee. As I reached for the napkins, I caught a glimpse of a single paper that had escaped the laptop's closing. Just 3 words were visible before Jennifer snatched it away. Power of attorney. What's that, honey? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Nothing, just boring legal stuff for a client, she said. But her laugh was brittle, like ice cracking under pressure. You know how it is, confidential real estate documents. So boring you'd fall asleep reading them. She shoved the paper into her drawer and locked it, the click of the lock unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. We ate lunch together, but Jennifer's eyes kept darting to that locked drawer. She talked too much, filled every silence with chatter about houses she was showing, clients who were difficult, anything except what had just happened. When I mentioned the upcoming Sunday dinner, asking if she could bring her potato salad, she paused mid-bite. Actually, Mom, I've been meaning to talk to you about something. Michael thinks, we all think, maybe you should consider, planning for the future. What kind of planning? I asked, though something cold was creeping up my spine. Just, making sure everything's in order. You're not getting any younger. She reached across the desk, grabbed my hand. Her palm was sweaty. We worry about you in that big house all alone. That night, Michael called. He never called on Tuesdays. He was always in court or meeting with clients. But there he was, his voice flowing through the phone like honey, too sweet to be natural. Mom, I've been thinking. We should review your will, your insurance policies, make sure everything's current. As your son and your lawyer, I want to protect you. Protect me from what? I asked. There was a pause. From the complexities of aging, Mom. It happens to everyone. Better to be prepared, right? The next Sunday, Tommy barely touched his food. My Tommy, who could eat half a roast by himself, just pushed the meat around his plate, creating patterns in the gravy. When I asked if he was feeling well, he mumbled something about stress at the store. But when I mentioned I was thinking about hiring a new assistant manager to help him, his head snapped up. No, he said, too quickly, too loudly. That's not necessary, Mom. Everything's under control. You don't need to be involved in the day-to-day anymore. 3 children. 3 unusual behaviors. 3 moments that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. But surely I was imagining things. This was Michael, who still called me every Sunday morning just to hear my voice. Jennifer, who sent me funny videos throughout the week. Tommy, who had "World's Best Mom" tattooed on his shoulder. They were acting strange, yes, but there had to be an explanation. There had to be. That night, I sat in Frank's old recliner, the one that still smelled faintly of his pipe tobacco after all these years, and gave myself a stern talking to. Hilda Margaret Thompson, I said out loud to the empty room, you're becoming a paranoid old fool. The clock on the mantel ticked in agreement, or maybe disagreement, but I chose to hear support for my self-scolding. Of course, Michael would want to review my legal documents. He'd been saying for years that estate planning was crucial, ever since he handled the Morrison family disaster where the children fought for 3 years over their mother's unsigned will. He was being a responsible son, using his expertise to protect me. I pulled out the photo album from his law school graduation, running my fingers over his proud smile, remembering how he'd dedicated his degree to me from the podium, making everyone cry. This was my Michael, my firstborn, who still kept my picture on his office desk. And Jennifer's reaction at her office? I laughed at myself, actually laughed out loud in that empty living room. October was her busy season in real estate. The rush before the holidays when everyone wanted to close deals. She was probably working on a confidential multi-million-dollar property deal, stressed about commissions and contracts. The poor girl nearly jumped out of her skin because she was concentrated, not because she was hiding something sinister. I remembered how she'd installed that medical alert button in my bathroom last year. Just in case, she'd said, tears in her eyes. I can't lose you too, Mom. As for Tommy, my sweet, simple Tommy, he'd always been sensitive about the business. Growing up with learning disabilities while his siblings excelled academically had left scars. He probably felt threatened by the idea of an assistant manager, worried I didn't think he was capable. But I'd seen him transform that hardware store, memorizing every customer's name, their projects, their problems. He'd painted Thompson and Son over the door with such pride last Christmas, adding the and Son himself as a surprise. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea, the one Jennifer brought me from that fancy organic shop, and opened my diary. October 15th, I wrote. I'm letting loneliness play tricks on my mind. The children are under stress. Michael has that big corporate case. Jennifer's fighting with David again about starting a family. Tommy's managing the store's expansion. They're distracted, not deceptive. I need to stop watching those crime shows on TV. The next morning, I woke with new resolve. I baked Michael's favorite brownies with walnuts, Jennifer's beloved lemon squares, and Tommy's chocolate chip cookies. I divided them into 3 packages, each with a note, "Love you to the moon and back, Mom." When I delivered Michael's to his office, his secretary Martha gushed about what a devoted son he was, always talking about me. At Jennifer's office, her partner Ron mentioned how Jennifer had my photo as her phone wallpaper. At the hardware store, old Mr. Patterson told me Tommy had just spent an hour helping his grandson with a school project for free, just like his grandma would do. 2 days later, I overheard Jennifer on the phone in my bathroom during Sunday dinner. The door was cracked, and her voice carried, "She won't suspect anything. She trusts us completely." My heart stopped for exactly 3 seconds. Then she continued, "The surprise party will be perfect. She'll never see it coming for her 69th birthday." A surprise party. Of course. My birthday was in 6 weeks. That explained everything. The secretive behavior, the laptop incident, Michael's sudden interest in getting affairs in order before a milestone birthday, Tommy's nervousness about me being too involved in the store when they were probably planning to renovate it as a gift. I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling my racing heart slow. These weren't conspirators. These were my children, planning something special, and I was ruining it with baseless suspicions. That night, I threw away the notebook where I'd been writing down their suspicious behaviors. I was ashamed of myself, disappointed in my lack of faith. Trust, I reminded myself, is the foundation of love, and I loved my children more than life itself. The day before my accident, November 2nd, Michael came by unexpectedly. It was a Thursday afternoon, gray clouds threatening rain, and I was sorting through Frank's old tools in the garage, deciding which ones to keep for Tommy and which to donate. Michael's BMW pulled into the driveway at 3:47 p.m. I remember the exact time because I was surprised. He should have been in court. "Mom," he called out, finding me in the garage. "What are you doing out here in the cold?" "Just organizing," I said, noticing his briefcase in his hand and the tension in his shoulders. "Why aren't you in court?" "Case got postponed. Thought I'd stop by and see if you needed anything." He set his briefcase on Frank's old workbench, the leather expensive against the scratched wood. "Actually, I need to use your bathroom. Too much coffee today." He disappeared into the house and I continued sorting wrenches, humming an old hymn. The briefcase sat there, monogrammed with his initials in gold. MRT Michael Robert Thompson. I'd bought him that briefcase for his 40th birthday last year. Spent more than I should have because he'd admired it in a catalog. As I moved past it to reach a box of screws, my elbow knocked it off the bench. It hit the concrete floor with a sharp crack, popping open and spilling papers everywhere. "Oh, Lord," I muttered, kneeling to gather the scattered documents. My hands were full of what looked like normal legal papers when I saw it. Power of attorney transfer in bold letters across the top. My name was printed underneath, Hilda Margaret Thompson. The signature line was blank, but everything else was filled out, dated for next week. My hands started to shake as I read further. This document would give Michael complete control over all my assets, medical decisions, everything. Behind it was a real estate evaluation for my house, dated just 2 weeks ago. Estimated value, $485,000. Red notes in Michael's handwriting covered the margins. Quick sale possible at $420,000. And buyer already interested. Cash offer. My home, where his father proposed to me, where all three of them took their first steps, reduced to numbers and quick sale strategies. Deeper in the pile was a business evaluation for Thompson Hardware. My breathing stopped. The number at the bottom seemed impossible. $2.8 million. The property alone was valued at $2.2 million due to the new shopping complex being built nearby. More notes in Michael's hand. Once Mom signs, liquidate immediately. Divide 3 ways after expenses. Estimated timeline, 6 weeks. An email printout dated yesterday was tucked between financial documents, from Jennifer to someone named Derek Walsh. Michael says once we get Mom to sign, we can move forward. Looking at facilities upstate. Found one for $3,000 a month that seems decent enough. She won't know the difference once the Alzheimer's progresses. Tommy's on board but nervous. Tell him to grow a spine. We need this done before she actually starts losing it and we can't get legal documents signed. Alzheimer's? I didn't have Alzheimer's. My doctor had just given me a clean bill of health 3 weeks ago. My mind was sharp. I did crossword puzzles every morning, read 2 books a week, balance my own checkbook to the penny. My phone was in my pocket. With trembling fingers, I took photos of every document, every email, every evaluation. The camera clicks seemed to echo in the garage like gunshots. I heard the toilet flush inside, heard Michael's footsteps moving through my kitchen. Quickly, I shoved everything back into the briefcase, trying to arrange it as it had been, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Mom," Michael's voice came from the doorway. "You okay? You look pale." I forced my face into something resembling normal, though normal was a concept that had just exploded into shrapnel. "Just tired, sweetheart. Think I'll go lie down." "Good idea," he said, picking up his briefcase without suspecting anything. "Oh, and Mom, this Sunday at dinner, we need to discuss some important family business. All 3 of us have something to share with you." After he left, I vomited in Frank's rose bushes, my body rejecting the truth my mind couldn't process. I couldn't wait until Sunday. The evidence on my phone burned like a brand, and I needed to know if there was any explanation, any possibility I was misunderstanding. By Friday evening, I'd called all 3 of them, my voice steady despite my shaking hands. "Family meeting tonight, 8 o'clock. It's important." They arrived within minutes of each other, exchanging glances I now recognized as conspiratorial rather than concerned. Michael loosened his tie as he sat in Frank's recliner, claiming his father's spot like he'd already inherited it. Jennifer perched on the couch, her phone in her hand, texting rapidly. Tommy stood by the door like he was ready to run. I stood in front of them, holding the printed photos I'd made at the library, my children's betrayal in full color. "I need you to explain these," I said, laying the papers on the coffee table like playing cards revealing a losing hand. The silence lasted exactly 7 seconds. I counted. Then Michael spoke, his lawyer voice calm and measured. "Where did you get these?" "Your briefcase fell open yesterday. Answer my question." Jennifer grabbed the papers, her face cycling through emotions. Shock, anger, then something cold I'd never seen before. "You went through Michael's private documents? Is that really your concern right now?" My voice cracked. "You're planning to put me in a home. You're selling everything. You told someone I have Alzheimer's." Michael stood, his 6-foot frame trying to intimidate me like I wasn't the woman who'd taught him to tie his shoes. "Mom, you're getting older. You're becoming forgetful. Name one thing I've forgotten." "You forgot Jennifer's birthday last month," he said smoothly. "Her birthday is next month, November 28th, and I already bought her present. Try again." Jennifer's mask finally slipped completely. "Fine. You want the truth? We're drowning, Mom. All of us. Michael has a gambling problem, lost everything in online poker. I'm getting divorced because David found out about my affair with Derek, and he's taking everything. Tommy owes money to some very dangerous people from a failed drug deal." "That's not true," Tommy whispered from the doorway, but Jennifer whirled on him. "Shut up, Tommy. You're in this too. Your girlfriend Maria? She's pregnant and her family's demanding money or they'll ruin us all with what they know about the store's books." I looked at each of my children, searching for any sign of the babies I'd raised. "So you decided to destroy me instead?" "It's not destroying you," Michael said, his voice taking on a rehearsed quality. "It's providing for your care while protecting the family assets. The hardware store is worth nearly $3 million, Mom. $3 million. Do you know what we could do with that money? That's your father's legacy." "Dad's dead," Jennifer screamed, actually screamed at me. "He's been dead for 35 years and we're still living in his shadow. That store, this house, everything is about him. What about us? What about what we need?" "I gave you everything," I whispered. "You gave us guilt," Michael said coldly. "Every sacrifice you made, every story about going without, every reminder of what you did for us. We never asked for that burden." Tommy finally spoke, his voice stronger. "I tried to tell them this was wrong, Mom, but they said if I didn't go along, they'd say the missing money from the store was all me." "What missing money?" Michael smiled, and it was a stranger's smile. "The 30,000 Jennifer and I have been skimming for the past year. All in Tommy's name, of course. He does the books, after all." The room spun. "You're going to sign everything over to us on Sunday," Jennifer said matter-of-factly, "or we'll have you declared incompetent. We have doctors who will testify. We have documents showing your confusion. We have witnesses to your erratic behavior." "What erratic behavior?" "The behavior you're about to display if you don't cooperate," Michael said. That's when I stood up too fast, felt my foot catch on the carpet edge, and tumbled backward toward the stairs. The hospital ceiling had exactly 247 tiles. I knew because I counted them over and over while pretending to be unconscious, while my children discussed my fate like I was already dead. The drugs they'd given me for pain made everything foggy, but not foggy enough to miss the conversations happening around my supposed comatose body. It started on the second day. Michael was on the phone, pacing by the window. "Yes, Judge Harrison, she's had a serious fall. Traumatic brain injury, the doctors say. We're devastated, of course, but we need to ensure her affairs are in order. You understand, with your mother's dementia last year." A pause. "Exactly. The papers are ready. Once she's conscious enough to sign but not competent enough to contest later." "Judge Harrison." "I knew him from church. Thought he was a good man. How many people were in on this?" Jennifer arrived that afternoon with a woman I didn't recognize, sharp-featured with calculating eyes. "This is Dr. Patricia Morse," Jennifer told Michael, "the psychiatrist I mentioned. She's ready to evaluate Mom and provide the incompetency diagnosis." "Without actually examining her properly?" the woman asked. "For $50,000, I don't think you need to be thorough," Michael replied. "Just convincing." They'd been planning this for 2 years. Through my slitted eyes, I watched Jennifer scroll through her phone, showing Michael a timeline. Started when the city announced the shopping complex development. We knew the property value would skyrocket. I had Derek do quiet inquiries, found Chinese investors willing to pay cash, no questions asked. "The nursing home?" Michael asked. "Mountain View, upstate, $3,000 a month, but they have a memory unit that's only $2,000 if we say she's violent. They medicate them more heavily there, keep them quiet." My stomach churned. They were planning to drug me into silence, lock me away like an embarrassing secret. Tommy came in during the night shift when he thought no one would see him. He sat by my bed, crying. "Mom, I'm so sorry. They have photos of me from when I was stupid enough to try selling pills in college. They said they'd send them to the police, ruin my life. Maria doesn't know. The baby's due in 3 months. I can't go to prison." He grabbed my hand, and I fought to keep it limp. "They've been planning everything. Michael has a buyer for your house already, some tech executive from California. Jennifer's been having the store appraised by different companies to drive up the price. They even hired actors to come to Sunday dinners for the past 3 months, pretending to be concerned neighbors who would testify about your confusion. Actors. Mrs. Pemberton, who'd started joining us, claiming to be new to the neighborhood. The young couple who'd moved in across the street, always stopping by to check on me. All fake. All part of the plan. The worst revelation came when Jennifer was alone with me, thinking I was unconscious. She was on the phone with Derek, her affair partner, who was apparently also her business partner in this scheme. Once we have the money, we leave. Mexico first, then Europe. Michael doesn't know I'm planning to take his share too. I have documents with his forged signature for some creative investments that went bad. He'll be left holding the bag for fraud while I disappear with everything. She was planning to betray Michael too. There was no honor among these thieves, even siblings. The beautiful part, she continued, is that even if she recovers fully, who's going to believe her? An old woman who fell down the stairs, claiming her successful children are trying to steal from her? Michael's a respected lawyer. I'm on the Chamber of Commerce. We've spent 2 years laying groundwork, having lunch with her doctors, expressing concern about her mental state. Dr. Kim thinks we're devoted children dealing with a difficult situation. Dr. Kim, my own physician for 15 years, convinced by their lies. The accident was perfect timing, Jennifer said, though I still think Michael pushed her a little. He denies it, but I saw his hand move. So it wasn't just a fall. My own son had pushed me down the stairs. The third night in the hospital, alone with only the beeping machines and the stranger in the next bed moaning in their sleep, I finally let myself break. Not outwardly. I maintained my unconscious facade, but inside, where the pain was so intense, I thought my heart might actually stop from the sheer weight of it. Tears leaked from my closed eyes, sliding down into my ears, pooling there like tiny lakes of grief. I traveled back through time in my mind, each memory now poisoned with new understanding. Michael's first day of school, how he'd clung to my leg, crying that he didn't want to leave me. I'd worked an extra shift that night to buy him the superhero lunchbox he wanted, to make school seem less scary. When had that frightened little boy become a man who could push his mother down the stairs? I remembered Jennifer at 13, sobbing in my arms after her first heartbreak. That boy Tyler who dumped her for her best friend. We'd stayed up all night eating ice cream from the container, and I'd told her she was worth 1,000 Tylers. I'd braided her hair and promised her that someday someone would love her the way she deserved. Now she was planning to lock me away in a memory unit, drugged into oblivion, while she spent my life's work on champagne in Europe. Tommy's face haunted me most. My baby, my struggle, my triumph. Born with the umbilical cord wrapped around his neck, blue and silent for 43 seconds that felt like 43 years. The doctors said he might have brain damage, might never be normal, but I'd fought for him, spent years in speech therapy, occupational therapy, fighting school systems that wanted to write him off. I'd taught him to read using hardware catalogs, the only thing that held his attention. Every small victory, his first word at 3, reading at 7, graduating high school at 19, had felt like climbing Everest. Now he sat by my bed, confessing they'd turned him into their accomplice, their fall guy. Frank would be devastated. I could almost hear his voice the way he'd sounded on his deathbed, struggling to breathe but still worried about us. Take care of our babies, Hilda. They're good kids. They just need love and guidance. I'd promised him, held his work-roughened hand and swore I'd protect them, raise them right, make him proud. What would I tell him when I met him again? That our babies became monsters? That his hardware store, built with his own hands, nail by nail, would be sold to strangers? That the family name he'd been so proud of was now associated with elder abuse and fraud? The Christmas memories hurt the most. Every December, despite having no money, I'd made magic happen. The year Michael wanted a bicycle, I'd collected cans for 6 months, searching dumpsters after my shifts. Jennifer's dollhouse, built from scraps I'd begged from construction sites, painted with sample paints from the hardware store. Tommy's train set, bought piece by piece from garage sales, cleaned and repaired until it looked almost new. They'd squealed with such joy on those Christmas mornings. When had that joy turned to greed? I thought about the lies I'd told to protect them from our poverty, pretending I wasn't hungry at dinner, saying I'd eaten at work, wearing the same 3 dresses for 5 years, claiming I just didn't like shopping, walking to work in snowstorms to save bus fare, telling them I enjoyed the exercise. Every sacrifice had been made with love, every lie told to preserve their dignity, their hope, their belief that the world was good and they were safe. Was it my fault? Had I spoiled them by giving too much? By never letting them see the struggle? Had I raised children who didn't understand the value of what they had? Or was this always in them, waiting, and I'd just been too blind with mother's love to see it? The pain in my chest had nothing to do with the fall. This was the pain of a mother's heart breaking into pieces so small they could never be put back together again. The moment everything changed came at 3:24 a.m. on my 4th night in the hospital. The night nurse, a young man named James, was adjusting my IV when he whispered something that stopped my heart. "Mrs. Thompson, I know you're awake. Don't move, don't react, just listen." Every muscle in my body wanted to tense, but I forced myself to remain limp, breathing steady. How did he know? "My mother is Nancy Rodriguez," he continued, checking monitors to look busy. "You held her hand through chemo 5 years ago. You drove her to every appointment when our family couldn't afford to miss work. You never let her sit alone. Nancy, my dear friend who'd fought breast cancer and won. Her son, the one studying nursing. This was him." "I've been watching your children," James whispered, pretending to check my chart. "I've heard what they're planning. It's wrong, Mrs. Thompson. Evil. My mother would never forgive me if I let this happen to you." In that moment, something shifted inside me. The broken pieces of my heart didn't heal. They transformed into something else. Armor, maybe. Or weapons. I thought of Frank. Not his death, but his life. The way he'd stood up. To the factory bosses who tried to cheat workers out of overtime. The way he'd faced down 3 men who'd tried to rob the store, armed with nothing but a hammer and raw courage. He hadn't raised a victim, he'd raised a fighter who'd somehow forgotten how to fight for herself. James leaned closer, adjusting my pillow. "If you want to fight this, blink twice, slowly." I waited 3 seconds, then blinked. Once, twice. "Good," he breathed. "Tomorrow they're bringing papers. Your son has Judge Harrison coming at 2 p.m. to witness your signature. But Mrs. Thompson, my mother knows people. Good people. People who remember what you've done for this community." The next morning, I kept my eyes closed as Michael arrived early rehearsing his performance. "Mom," he practiced, "we only want what's best for you. This power of attorney is for your protection." He tried different tones. Concerned, loving, authoritative. Each version more false than the last. But while he practiced his lies, I was preparing my truth. Every cruel word they'd spoken, every detail of their conspiracy, was carved into my memory. The actor neighbors, the bribed psychiatrist, the forged documents Tommy mentioned. I had weapons they didn't know about. 40 years of genuine kindness that had built real relationships, real trust, real allies in this town. When Jennifer arrived, complaining on the phone about how long this was taking, how she needed to be in Mexico by Thanksgiving, I felt the last of my maternal devotion die. These weren't my children anymore. My children had died somewhere along the way, replaced by these strangers who wore their faces. And I owed these strangers nothing. Tommy came last, silent and shameful, and for a moment I almost wavered. Then I heard him on the phone with Michael. "Yeah, I'll hold her hand when she signs. Make it look like I'm comforting her. That'll look good for the judge." Even his kindness was performance now. Lying there, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible a week ago. I would destroy them, not with hatred, but with justice. Not with revenge, but with consequences. They'd forgotten that before I was their mother, I was Hilda Margaret O'Brien, who'd grown up fighting 4 brothers for every scrap of respect, who'd worked 3 jobs while pregnant, who'd built a life from ashes and wasn't about to let anyone, not even my own blood, burn it down again. James returned that afternoon with a small smile. "Your friend Bill Masters called my mother. The retired judge, he has a message for you. The cavalry is coming. Be ready." Bill Masters, who I'd testified for in his custody battle 20 years ago, helping him keep his grandchildren, another seed of kindness about to bloom into salvation. I was ready, more ready than I'd ever been in my life. James returned at dawn with a small phone hidden in a medicine cup. 5 minutes, he whispered. Then I need it back. The number for Bill Masters is already dialed. Bill's voice was gravelly but warm. "Hilda, you magnificent woman. Nancy Rodriguez told me everything. I've got Sarah Martinez on the case. Best elder law attorney in 3 states. She's driving down from Chicago right now." "Bill, they have Judge Harrison. Corrupt bastard, I know. But I have Judge Catherine Wells. Remember her? You tutored her daughter in math for free when they were struggling. She's never forgotten. She'll be there at 2 p.m. with a court recorder." My allies were assembling like pieces on a chessboard. Bill explained the plan quickly. Sarah Martinez had already filed emergency injunctions, freezing all my assets based on suspicious activity Tommy had unknowingly documented in the store's books. The $30,000 Jennifer and Michael had stolen? Tommy, bless his meticulous nature, had marked every discrepancy, thinking he was protecting himself. Instead, he'd created evidence. "Sarah has prepared 3 documents for you to sign," Bill continued. "A new trust that locks everything down tighter than Fort Knox, a restraining order against all 3 of them, and criminal charges for fraud, elder abuse, and attempted theft. But Hilda, here's the brilliant part. The papers will look identical to their power of attorney documents from a distance." James smuggled in the real documents that evening, hidden in a flower arrangement from concerned neighbors. Actually, Sarah Martinez's paralegal team. The papers were tucked behind get well cards, looking innocent to anyone watching. I studied them during the night, memorizing every word through slitted eyes while James stood guard. Sarah had been thorough. The trust protected not just my assets, but included provisions that would haunt my children. Any attempt to contest would trigger immediate donation of the entire estate to the Alzheimer's Association. Ironic, considering their fake diagnosis. The criminal charges were federal because they'd crossed state lines with their conspiracy, involving Jennifer's contacts in New York. This wasn't just theft anymore, it was racketeering. But the masterpiece was what Sarah called the confession clause. If they wanted any chance of avoiding maximum sentences, they'd have to provide full written confessions, including the names of every accomplice. Dr. Patricia Morse, the psychiatric evaluator for hire, the actors who'd pretended to be neighbors, Derek Walsh, Jennifer's lover, and co-conspirator. Even Judge Harrison's involvement would be exposed. James had been recording everything on his phone, supposedly for medical records. Hospital policy, he'd tell anyone who asked, documenting patient interactions for liability. He'd captured Michael discussing the plan with Jennifer on the phone with Derek about moving me to the facility, Tommy crying about the blackmail, all admissible because they'd had no expectation of privacy in a public hospital room. The secret weapon came from an unexpected source. Maria, Tommy's pregnant girlfriend, had contacted Nancy Rodriguez. She'd been suspicious of Tommy's behavior and had installed a recording app on his phone weeks ago, thinking he was cheating. Instead, she'd captured dozens of conversations about the conspiracy. Horrified and heartbroken, she'd agreed to testify in exchange for immunity for Tommy from the worst charges. She still loved him, the fool, but wouldn't let him destroy his mother. Sarah had also discovered something beautiful. The hardware store property had a deed restriction Frank had put in place 30 years ago that I'd forgotten about. It could only be sold with the unanimous written consent of all surviving family members, including Frank's elderly sister Dorothy in Maine, who thought my children were ungrateful vipers and would never sign. The final touch was personal. In my new will, witnessed and notarized by Sarah's team, I left each child exactly $1 and a letter. The letters, to be publicly read at the will reading, detailed every sacrifice I'd made for them, every moment of love they'd thrown away, every opportunity for redemption they'd rejected. The rest would go to establishing the Frank and Hilda Thompson Foundation for Elder Protection. By Friday morning, everything was in place. The trap was set. All that remained was the performance of a lifetime. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzling, fitting weather for an execution. My children arrived early, transforming my hospital room into their stage. Michael directed the arrangements like a theater producer, positioning chairs, adjusting the blinds for better light, even bringing a small vase of flowers to place on the bedside table. "We want everything to look loving and proper," he told Jennifer, who was applying fresh lipstick in her compact mirror. By 1:30 p.m., the room began filling with their carefully selected audience. Judge Harrison arrived first, his thick fingers adorned with rings that caught the light. He shook Michael's hand with the familiarity of co-conspirators, discussing their golf plans for next week as if my future wasn't hanging in the balance. The corrupt psychiatrist, Dr. Patricia Morse, entered with a medical bag that probably contained nothing more than props for her performance. She approached my bed, pretending to check my pupils while whispering to Michael, "She seems stable enough to hold a pen. That's all we need." Jennifer had invited Aunt Ruth and Uncle George, my late sister's family, telling them it was important they witness poor Hilda's necessary transition to professional care. Ruth had tears in her eyes as she clutched George's arm. "Such devoted children," she murmured to Jennifer, who hugged her with practiced sorrow. They'd also brought two of Michael's law partners as witnesses, young men in expensive suits who kept checking their phones, eager to be done with this distasteful business. The notary, a nervous woman named Diane Fletcher, set up her stamps and seals with shaking hands. I wondered if she knew she was participating in a crime or if she was just another person deceived by my children's performance. Tommy stood in the corner, his face pale, hands jammed in his pockets. Occasionally, he'd glance at the door as if planning to run, but Michael's sharp looks kept him in place. At 1:45, unexpected visitors began arriving. Nancy Rodriguez wheeled herself in, claiming she wanted to pay respects to her dear friend. Michael tried to object, but Nancy played frail and confused. "Oh, I won't be any trouble. Hilda saved my life, you know. The least I can do is hold her hand." James helped position her wheelchair right next to my bed, where she could see everything. Then Bill Masters walked in, leaning on his cane, followed by three people my children didn't recognize. Sarah Martinez in a conservative suit carrying a briefcase, Judge Catherine Wells in civilian clothes, and a court reporter with a stenograph machine. "Just happened to be visiting," Bill said cheerfully. "Heard dear Hilda had taken a fall. You don't mind if we pay our respects?" Michael's jaw tightened. "Actually, we're having a private family moment." "Nonsense," Judge Harrison interrupted, not recognizing Judge Wells out of her robes. "The more witnesses to this poor woman's care arrangements, the better. Come in, come in." The room was now packed with two opposing armies, though only one side knew a battle was about to begin. Jennifer kept checking her phone, texting Derek about flight arrangements. She'd already told him to have the champagne ready for their celebration. Michael reviewed his papers one more time, the power of attorney documents positioned perfectly for quick signing. Dr. Morse prepared her medical opinion that would declare me incompetent immediately after signing, preventing any future challenges. At 1:55, Michael approached my bed with the reverence of a priest approaching an altar. "I think it's time," he announced solemnly. "The doctors say Mom is having a brief moment of clarity." We should take advantage of it while we can. The nurse on duty, not James, but an older woman named Patricia who'd been briefed by James, entered with perfect timing. "Mrs. Thompson," she said loudly, "can you hear me? Your children are here. They need you to sign some papers for your care." I let my eyelids flutter, playing the part of someone struggling toward consciousness. The room held its breath. Judge Harrison positioned himself at the foot of the bed. The notary prepared her stamp. Michael held out the pen like a weapon. The trap was about to spring. My eyes opened fully, clear and sharp as broken glass. Instead of the confused, medicated stare they expected, I looked directly at Michael with complete lucidity. "Hello, son," I said, my voice strong and steady. "Ready to steal from your mother?" The room froze. Michael's hand, extended with the pen, trembled in midair. Jennifer's phone clattered to the floor. Judge Harrison took a step backward, his florid face draining of color. "Mom," Michael stammered, "you're confused. The fall you caused when you pushed me?" I sat up straighter, Nancy Rodriguez squeezing my hand in support. "Yes, Michael, I remember everything, including the past 5 days of listening to you plan my imprisonment." I reached not for Michael's pen, but for the papers James had hidden under my pillow. With deliberate movements, I signed my name on 3 documents while speaking clearly. "I'm signing a criminal complaint for elder abuse, fraud, and attempted murder. I'm signing a restraining order against my 3 children, and I'm placing all my assets in an irrevocable trust." "This is ridiculous!" Jennifer shrieked, lunging forward, but Bill Masters blocked her with his cane. "She's obviously delusional. Dr. Morse, examine her." Dr. Patricia Morse stepped forward, but Judge Catherine Wells stood up, removing her coat to reveal her judicial robes underneath. "I don't think that will be necessary. I'm Judge Catherine Wells, here to witness Mrs. Thompson's complete mental competency." She nodded to the court reporter who'd been transcribing everything. "Are you getting all this?" Michael's face went from red to white to gray in seconds. "You can't, this isn't Judge Harrison, tell them." Judge Harrison was backing toward the door, but Sarah Martinez stood in his way. "Judge Harrison, you're named in the criminal complaint as a co-conspirator. I wouldn't leave if I were you." I pulled out my phone, my fingers steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Would everyone like to hear what my loving children have been saying when they thought I was unconscious? The room filled with Jennifer's recorded voice. "Once we get Mom to sign, we move her to the facility upstate. $3,000 a month. But if we say she's violent, they'll keep her sedated." Aunt Ruth gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Uncle George stood up so fast his chair fell over. "Jennifer, how could you?" The recording continued with Michael's voice. "The house is already sold. The buyer's ready. $3 million for the hardware store, divided 3 ways after we pay off Judge Harrison and Dr. Morse." "That's illegally recorded," Michael shouted, his lawyer instincts finally kicking in. "Actually," James stepped forward, still in his scrubs, "hospital policy allows recording of patient interactions for medical records. I've been documenting Mrs. Thompson's care, including all conversations that occurred in her presence." Jennifer turned on Tommy. "This is your fault. You told her." "I didn't tell her anything," Tommy said quietly. "She heard everything. Because you spoke about it right in front of her, thinking she was unconscious." He pulled something from his pocket, a small recorder. "But I've been recording everything for the past month. Maria made me. She knew something was wrong." His voice broke. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. They said they'd ruin me, but I should have protected you." Sarah Martinez opened her briefcase, pulling out thick folders. "These are copies of the evidence already filed with the FBI. Yes, the FBI, because this conspiracy crossed state lines. Wire fraud, racketeering, conspiracy to commit kidnapping by forcing someone into a facility against their will." She handed folders to each of my children. "You have 2 choices. Sign full confessions naming every accomplice, or face federal charges with mandatory minimums of 20 years. Dr. Morse tried to slip out during the chaos, but two FBI agents entered the room, badges visible. Dr. Patricia Morse, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud. Jennifer screamed, actually screamed as the reality hit her. You can't do this. We're your children. I stood up from the bed, steady on my feet, Nancy and Bill flanking me like guardians. No, my children died somewhere along the path of their greed. You're just criminals who happen to share my DNA. The aftermath unfolded like dominoes, falling in precise order. Michael was disbarred within 3 weeks, the State Bar Association moving with unprecedented speed once the FBI provided recordings of him discussing bribing judges and forging documents. His wife Sandra filed for divorce the day after his arrest, taking the twins and moving back to her parents in Seattle. She sent me a letter apologizing, saying she'd suspected something but had been too afraid to ask. I wrote back telling her the boys weren't responsible for their father's crimes, and I'd still like to know my grandsons if she'd allow it. Jennifer's fall was perhaps the most spectacular. Derek Walsh, her lover and co-conspirator, fled to Mexico the moment he heard about the arrests, taking the $200,000 Jennifer had already transferred to their joint account. She discovered this through a text he sent from Cabo. Sorry, babe, but it's every man for himself. The real estate board revoked her license after 17 clients came forward, suddenly realizing questionable things about their transactions. She spent 6 months in federal prison before accepting a plea deal that included testifying against Judge Harrison, who ultimately received 8 years for corruption. Tommy's path was different. Because Maria had convinced him to document everything and because he'd been coerced through blackmail, the prosecutor offered him a deal: 2 years probation, 300 hours of community service, and mandatory therapy. Maria stood by him through it all, even when her family begged her to leave. They had their baby, a little girl they named Hope, and Tommy sent me pictures every week, though he wasn't allowed to see me due to the restraining order. After a year, I petitioned to have his order lifted. He came to my new house, fell to his knees in my garden, and sobbed for an hour. We're slowly rebuilding, one careful conversation at a time. The hardware store thrived under new management. I hired the Atkinsons, a young couple who'd been struggling to start their own business, giving them a chance Frank would have appreciated. They transformed it into a community hub, adding workshops for kids, senior discount days, and a small cafe where old-timers could drink coffee and solve the world's problems. The sign still reads, Thompson Hardware, and Frank's picture hangs behind the register, watching over it all. Judge Harrison's trial became a sensation, exposing a network of corruption that reached into 3 counties. 14 other families came forward with similar stories of judges and lawyers conspiring to steal from elderly relatives. The FBI called it Operation Golden Years, and it resulted in 37 arrests. I testified at 5 trials, my voice steady as I looked each defendant in the eye and told my truth. The house on Maple Street sold to a young family with 3 children who reminded me of mine at that age, full of innocent joy and chaos. I used the money to buy a cottage by Sailorville Lake, the place Frank and I had always dreamed of retiring. It's smaller, just 2 bedrooms, but the sunrise over the water makes my coffee taste like hope. Nancy Rodriguez lives 4 houses down, and we walk our little rescue dogs together each morning, 2 old warriors who survived our battles. The Frank and Hilda Thompson Foundation for Elder Protection launched with the settlement money from the various lawsuits. We provide free legal services to elderly victims of family fraud, emergency housing for those displaced by financial abuse, and education programs in senior centers about protecting assets. Last month, we helped our 100th client, an 82-year-old man whose nephew was trying to steal his farm. Seeing his relief, his tears of gratitude, I thought of Frank. He would be proud. My new life is quieter, but not lonely. I volunteer at the library teaching adults to read. I joined a garden club where we argue about tomato varieties with the passion of scholars. I even started dating Bill Masters, that clever old judge who helped save me. We play cards on Friday nights and dance to old songs in my kitchen. Every morning now, I sit on my small deck overlooking Sailorville Lake, watching the sun paint the water, gold and pink. My coffee steaming in the mug that reads, "Still Fighting," a gift from Nancy on my 70th birthday. The morning birds sing their territorial songs, and I think about territory too, about the boundaries we must draw even with those we love most. Yesterday, I received a letter from Michael. He's working at a legal aid clinic now, part of his plea agreement, helping people who can't afford lawyers. He wrote, "I see you in every elderly client who walks through our door, Mom. I see what I almost stole from you in their eyes. Not just money, but dignity, trust, the right to live their final years in peace. I don't ask for forgiveness. I ask only that you know I finally understand the monster I became." I keep that letter in my drawer, next to Jennifer's postcards from the women's facility where she's serving her remaining time. She's teaching literacy to other inmates, she says. Found purpose in books the way I always hoped she would. "You taught me to read," she wrote, "but I never learned to read people's hearts, especially my own. The truth is, family can become the most dangerous stranger you'll ever meet. We assume blood means loyalty, that DNA carries some sacred code of protection. But greed is a poison that doesn't care about genetics. It seeps into hearts gradually, drop by drop, until children can look at their parents and see only bank accounts, property deeds, and insurance policies. I think about all the warning signs I missed, or rather, chose not to see. The subtle shifts in conversation toward money, the sudden interest in my affairs, the way they stopped seeing me as their mother and started seeing me as an obstacle to their inheritance. How many of you watching have noticed these signs in your own families? How many of you have dismissed them, as I did, because surely your children would never? But here's what I learned in that hospital bed, pretending to be unconscious while my world crumbled. You can love your children with every fiber of your being and still protect yourself from them. Love doesn't mean blindness, trust doesn't mean stupidity, and sacrifice doesn't mean becoming a victim. The saddest part isn't what they tried to take from me. It's what they succeeded in destroying. The unconditional trust between a mother and her children. That's gone forever, buried deeper than Frank, and no amount of apologies or prison time will resurrect it. Tommy and I are rebuilding something new, but it's built on different ground now, with lawyers and witnesses and careful documentation. Even forgiveness comes with paperwork, yet I'm not bitter. Bitterness would mean they won. Instead, I'm wise. I've learned that sometimes the family you choose, Nancy with her morning walks, Bill with his terrible jokes, the Atkinsons at the store who call me Grandma T, can be more faithful than the family you raised. I've learned that protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. And I've learned that it's never too late to fight back, even when you're 70 and lying in a hospital bed. To those of you watching who see yourselves in my story, who recognize the gathering storms in your own families, I say this: document everything. Tell trusted friends. Hire a lawyer before you need one. Put safeguards in place while you still can. Don't wait for the push down the stairs, literal or figurative. And to those of you who might be the children in this story, who find yourselves looking at your aging parents and calculating their worth, remember this: that money you're scheming for, it will disappear faster than morning mist. But the guilt, that's forever. Just ask my children. What would you do if you discovered your family was planning to betray you? Would you have the strength to fight back? Or would you let love blind you until it's too late? Share your thoughts below, and if you know someone who needs to hear this story, please share it with them. Sometimes a warning comes disguised as a story, and sometimes that warning can save a life. Remember, your years of sacrifice don't make you a doormat. They make you a warrior who's earned the right to fight back.